to the United States to learn English for 6 months. Had no clue what I wanted to do except party. My grades were extremely bad. My GPA turned out to be 1.6. I started from ground zero. Me to get into the University of Texas not knowing any English with really bad grades, it was close to impossible. When I got in, that's when I realized if you focus and ignore the world, you can't achieve anything. Started feeling this conviction from my soul. The life that I was living was destructive. You go with the experts, and the first thing they're going to tell you, where you're weak, you have addictions, you have this, you have that. There's not a school to go and get wise. Wisdom is a gift from above. That little whisper in your soul that says, that's the path. Anyone that says to really change your life is easy, for me, it was not easy. It was very hard. Separate yourself from 95% of my friends. Friends are like an elevator. You go in with them and you go either you go up or you go down. Little by little, I started seeing a door opening here, create the space for the miracle to happen. I was presented with my journey. That's what I needed to do. Tell stories and to make films. When I got into the University of Texas and I touched a camera, this is when I understood we listen with our eyes. How can I tell stories visually? One of the greatest tragedies in life is that life makes sense in retrospective. Life doesn't make sense when you're there. That could be a tragedy unless you change to live in a state of surrender. That's my motto. I do meditation focused on surrender. We control absolutely nothing. The minute you feel you control something, that's the time when you're going into this chaotic, schizophrenic way of life. I always say, there's a little mountain, you think that's your goal, you're right to the top of the mountain. You realize the mountains are never gonna end. 2015, there was a family tragedy. It was a pain that was bigger than I could carry. When that level of suffering came into my life, I drowned. I literally drowned.
You think you're strong, and then something terrible happens, and you realize how weak you really were.
It's an illusion. We control absolutely nothing.
We have another very special guest for you here at No Surrender. I'm honored to sit down with filmmaker, writer, and director Alejandro Monteverde. He is best known for the internationally impactful film Sound of Freedom. It shined a bright light on the very dark, sick, and twisted $39 billion per year underworld of child trafficking. Alejandro's journey is a powerful study in faith, discipline, surrender, and no surrender. He came to the United States at just 17 years old, speaking almost no English, had a failing GPA, and no clear plan. Only a desire to party. Then, to learn, to grow, and eventually tell stories that really matter. What began as a 6-month trip turned into a lifelong calling. In this conversation, we explore his path from ground zero to the University of Texas, his philosophy on purpose versus ego, the role of suffering in shaping meaning, and how an incredibly intense family tragedy ultimately led him inward to meditation, healing, and clarity. We talk about art as a force for unity, storytelling as an invitation to deeper conversation, and why surrender and no surrender have become guiding principles of his life and work. This is a profound conversation about resilience, identity, and faith. But before we dive in, we would be extremely grateful if you hit the like and subscribe buttons. This episode is brought to you by our partners over at Don't Trade It In. It's the best and fastest way to get top dollar for your car from the comfort of your home. Please visit don'ttradeitin.com today.
All right, Justin Cole here with No Surrender, and I'm honored to have Alejandro Monteverde with us today. And we're going to be talking about his career, his movies he's been working on. There's a movie that's about to come out and a lot of other things. So welcome to the show, Alejandro.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So yeah, we'll just start back all the way. I think at 17, you came to the United States, and was it on a bus or were you in a car? How did you arrive?
No. I came to the United States in 94. I was about to turn 18 years old. And I came to the United States to learn English. So it was never intended to stay here. I like this saying. Actually, I opened one of my films with this saying. You want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. If you would have told me at 17 that I would live the rest of my life in Los Angeles or in the United States, it would make absolutely no sense. I only came here to learn English for 6 months. And now I've been here, I don't know, almost 20-something years or more.
So came at 17 to learn English, and then what was next? Were you by yourself?
Yes. I moved here by myself with some friends from my hometown, and they were all older than me. They were going to college. They were going to stay here at least, 3 or 4 years college time. And I just kind of tag along to live with them in Texas. And we got an apartment. And my goal was just to learn English 6 months and go back. But the minute I landed, I got to experience, because I've been in the United States many times as vacations, never, to live for a longer period, like 6 months. When I was here, I've genuinely fallen in love with this country. I just love the country, and I kind of felt that I was going to stay here longer. I was going to stay here for 3 years now. Actually, it's 30 years. Wow.
Yeah. So started out as 6 months, and then had you already graduated from high school when you came?
No, I came here, when I was 17 years old. I'm not, obviously, I am not the same person in any way, shape, or form, philosophically speaking, spiritually speaking, professionally speaking. Some people know what they want to do at a very young age. I had no clue what I wanted to do except party. I was 17 years old with no direction, partying way too much, and I didn't know what I want to do with my life. So my grades were extremely bad. Just to give you an idea, when I transferred my credits from the high school in Mexico to the U.S. high school, my GPA turned out to be 1.6. Because in the school that I was going in Mexico, and I think it's in all Mexico, I don't know if things change, but you pass with a D. So a D is a passing grade. So all my grades were Ds. So if you get all Ds, if you translate that into GPA, it's 1.6. I came here with a low, and to make things even harder or worse, I didn't speak a word of English. So I was going to high school in the US with 1.6 GPA, not knowing a word of English and not knowing what I wanted to do. So I started from ground zero.
Wow. Wow. So then you went from that to the University of Texas, is that right?
Yeah, so for me to get into the University of Texas, was like the same thing as Tucker did with the car. It was close to impossible at that time, and I think still is, but at that time was rated number 4, the best university in the United States for what I wanted to do. Communications was impossible to get in. I think there was a 2-year waiting list. Obviously, 3.5 to 4.0 GPA, and you still will not be able to get in. So for me to be able to get in, not knowing any English, with really bad grades, it was literally close to impossible. And when I got in, that's when I realized that, the word impossible, one of my films called Little Boy, the tagline is believe the impossible. If you were to ask me what is the first, professionally speaking, what was the first impossible barrier that I was able to achieve to be accepted at the University of Texas, Austin, on film school, that was a massive, once I was able to get in, then I realized that, even though it's a cliche, but if you focus and ignore the world, you can't achieve anything. And when I mean ignore the world is being programmed to yell out loud the impossibilities. So the world is constantly telling you, that's impossible, that's impossible. So that's a line that I also wrote. I tend to write in my screenplays a lot of my own personal experiences. So there's a line in one of my films that says, ignore the world and focus. That was a big stepping thing that happened in my career, because that kind of opened up my sensibility into trying to achieve the impossible.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I actually went through a similar process. So as far as like the university that I went to was the University of Wisconsin, and I grew up in Texas and went up there and had a rude awakening. My goal was to play football there, but I got hurt, and my GPA was also low. For me, I had to take classes at a community college before I could get in. Did you have to do something like that, or like how did you go from the 1.6 GPA to getting into the University of Texas?
Yeah. Well, as anything, it's if you say, I want to climb, imagine you are in the worst health possible with addictions and with no any kind of conditioning, and you say, I'm going to climb to the top of Mount Everest. Everybody has their own Mount Everest. So Mount Everest for a climber, because it's very famous, everybody's like, oh, he wants to climb Mount Everest. Everybody has their own Mount Everest. Whatever you goal is or your dream is, that's your Mount Everest. Now you look back and I was completely out of shape. I had never climbed even a mountain because I never had a desire to climb a mountain. So the minute that a dream comes or a desire comes into your heart, I always say, well, once you have the desire, that desire comes from two places, either from your own ego, or if I even say it worse, because I think the ego is the biggest battle of humanity. Some people, we all have egos, obviously, and his ego is narcissistic in many ways, shape, or form, and it's a whole sense of the word. So it's where does that desire to climb or to where does that dream comes from? Does it come from your own ego, or does it come from a higher power? And once you, that's to me the first step. Once you have a desire, it doesn't matter how good it is. Obviously, if the desire is negative, and it's very obvious that where it comes from, right? It comes from a darker place. But the harder part is when the desire, doesn't have any negativeness. It still could be a very egotistic desire, right? Because maybe you don't supposed to climb Mount Everest. So in this case, for me, it was getting into the University of Texas was also in line with what I was going spiritually. I was going through a conversion. I was going, partying, starting to feel, and the interesting part is that nobody was telling me what you're doing is wrong. And that was the beauty. I started to kind of understand and feeling this conviction from my soul that the life that I was living was destructive. So at the same time, when you feel this is destructive, I was presented with my journey. And it felt, for me, when your desire does not come from your ego, is when you feel peace. And I felt the peace that's what I needed to do, which is to tell stories and to make films. And I wanted to study in the best school. And I did my little research, and that's when I found the University of Texas. And I happened to be in Austin, Texas, studying English. So you go, it's just like, I'm going to keep using the Mount Everest. You go with the experts, and the first thing they're going to tell you where you're weak. You have addictions, you have this, you have that. You first have to start working out, getting in shape. Really, and if you really want this, you got to stop drinking, you got to stop partying, you got to really wake up at 5 a.m. This is the things you got to do for 2 years before you can consider to go into Mount Everest. For me, those 2 years was community college. And it was like, look, if you can go to community college and get all A's and really put your GPA up and really get your stuff together and really train yourself into movies and start watching movies and start really preparing yourself. And after you put 2 years of that, then you revisit if you're in shape enough to apply and to the path that you feel a calling to. And that's what I did. And I always say to people, anyone can become an intellectual, anybody. So I do respect intellectuals, but I say, yes, you and everybody else can become intellectual. How do you become intellectual? To just read and read and read. And if you have the opportunity, you get 4 colleges degrees and you become you just pretty much educate yourself, academically speaking, at the highest level. Now, how do you get wisdom? There's not a school to go and get wise. Wisdom is a gift from above. And wisdom is that little whisper in your soul that says right, left, or yes, that's the path. So by the grace of God, I felt that direction. People may ask, well, how did you know that? How did you know that you needed to, pretty much take a massive detour of who you were and really just completely change your life dramatically so you can maybe consider that desire that was put in your soul? So those 2 years, it wasn't just community college, it was really also learning English, and diving deep, deep, deep into the art of storytelling. So it was all together. And in order for, because anyone that says to really change your life is easy, I mean, I don't know. I can only tell you from my own experience. For me, it was not easy. It was very hard because I did love that lifestyle. It's not like, oh, I hate that lifestyle. No, I actually loved it. I love partying. I love going out. I love all that destructive lifestyle that I was living. So I was not living something I hated. To me, that's easy. To live something that I actually enjoyed was really difficult. And that meant to also separate yourself from 95% of my friends, because you can't, I believe friends are like an elevator. You're going with them and you go either you go up or you go down. That's how elevators work. And I understood that as well. I said, look, I want to go this path, but every time I go out with these friends, I end up in the opposite place where I want to go, you know? So all of those, it was I continued to be a work in progress, but at that time, it was a lot of heavy lifting. And little by little, I started seeing a door opening here and allowing, I always say, look, miracles happen, but you have to create the space for the miracle to happen, It's like, I love the story of Moses. If the Red Sea would have opened, but Moses wouldn't be there, it would have mean absolutely nothing, because Moses, he wouldn't be able to. You got to go put yourself in front of the Red Sea so you got to create the spaces. But if I say I want to go into the University of Texas and I don't create the space and get in shape, I'm never going to get in. The miracle is not going to happen. I mean, it's you're going to wake up one day and all of a sudden get an acceptance letters. So you want to win the lottery, you got to buy the ticket. That was the journey and that taught me a lot. That was a journey that, it taught me a lot of how, I always say the difference between being a film student and, today, for me, there's no difference. It was exactly the same. It's just, the giants don't get any smaller. For me, getting into University of Texas is the same thing as maybe making $100 million film. Same size of giant.
Right. Yeah. And so was it in the community college classes? Was it before you got into the University of Texas that you knew that you wanted to make films? Was it like you mentioned that the University of Texas, you discovered that was the place to go. Was that like, did you decide to go to the community college first to start working on your college and then find out that the University of Texas is where you wanted to go? Or what specific time did you know, like, I want to make films, like this is my destiny?
Well, it's a process. It is nothing happens. I mean, I always have to say there's a difference between a fact and an opinion. I always want to be very careful because opinions are very different than facts, right? So these are opinions that I will be sharing, and sometimes I will say this is a fact, but this is just an opinion. I don't believe that changes happen, from one day to the other. So it's not like one day I knew I want to make films. It was, I want to tell stories. How? I don't know. So the first part, I want to tell stories, was I wanted to be an actor, because as an actor, it was like the most obvious one, because you play another character and you're telling that character's story. So I started taking acting classes. But at the same time, my parents, because they didn't have college degrees, both of them, for them that was very important that 3 children have college degrees. That was their goal. They didn't care what degree. So that's when one thing led to another, because I was like, okay, then I'll get a degree. I'll get a degree on film. I get to learn more film so I can become a better actor. So it started like that. Then I started looking what's the best film schools. And out of all, University of Texas pop, and I was in Austin, I was like, okay, that's the school. So one thing leads to another one. And that's what I say about the preparation. You want to go into the top of Mount Everest, you start learning, okay, you got to buy this backpack, these shoes, you got to do a lot of sit-ups, a lot of push-ups, you got to do this kind of exercise, you got to do breathing exercises. And as you go, you start learning more about what is required. So this was kind of like that path. And then eventually I ended up applying to go to film school with the desire to be an actor. But when I got into the University of Texas and I touched a camera, there was like a special right away connection. Like I knew how to tell the stories through. This is when I understood we listen with our eyes. So how can I tell stories visually? And through telling stories visually, then I move into what felt more a bigger calling for me. And I still love acting, but I felt like I could act through my actors, through just collaborating on this bigger story. And then it was like that. So it was progressive, evolving. The dream continued to evolve until I got into the film school. Now, I always look back, they say that one of the greatest tragedies in life is that life makes sense in retrospective. A lot of times, life doesn't make sense when you're there. And that could be a tragedy unless you change to live in a state of surrender. That's my motto. One of the reasons I wanted to do this is because I saw the word surrender. Everything, my phone is called surrender, my coffee mugs are called surrender.
Wow.
Everything, I've been in the surrender path. I've been doing almost around 8 years. I meditate every morning. I do meditation focused on surrendering. Whole philosophy and meditation, realizing that we control absolutely nothing. And the minute you feel you control something, that's the time when you start completely going into this chaotic, schizophrenic way of life. And that's when your mind starts to become, because it's an illusion, we control absolutely nothing. So that has been part of my entire journey. And little by little, it continues on because we are our nature. We are programmed to try to control. Now, that doesn't mean you just lean back. That means you work as hard as you can, but at the end, results are not up to you because you don't control the results. You don't control when. If people only knew when they were going to cease to exist, that we will live completely different lives. Right now, we're all thinking in a way that we are immortal. But if you knew that today is the last day of living, I doubt that we will be doing this interview.
Yeah.
But we don't know. I don't know. Same as me. I don't know. Maybe I finish this and I die. I would be like, oh, I should have taken that last moment to be with my kids. So we live in a very unknown, we don't know anything. I think if everybody would know their date that they're leaving this earth, they will use their time completely different. And when I say they, I include myself in that. But we don't know. So that doesn't mean just lean back. That means you show up, you cannot steer a car that is parked. The car has to be moving. And then the car will go left or right. But if it's parked, it doesn't matter you go left or right. The car is not going to go left or right. It's just going to stay. So you have to be on the move. And for life, I always say there's a little mountain, and then you think that's your goal. You're right to the top of the mountain, and you're on the top. And then you realize, no, you just went here to see the real mountain. The real mountain is it's like, oh, man. Then you climb the mountain, and then you think you get to the top, and it's like, no. That was just a mountain to let you see the other mountain because it was blocking it. The real mountain you got to climb is that one. And then after you're getting older, you realize the mountains are never going to end. They're going to end until you die. There's always going to be a mountain that you're going to want to climb. So I feel like the day you stop to trying to climb a mountain, I feel like that's the time where it's time to, because there's always going to be a mountain, and it doesn't have to be professionally speaking. Can you learn how to be more in the present? That's a massive mountain. You can be retired. Like always people think work. When people say, are you a director? I say, no, I'm not a director. That's what I do. I'm not a filmmaker. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a friend. I'm a human being struggling to figure out life. Being a human being, it's way more challenging than what I do. Going back, you look back into your life and you're like, where does all these 25 years go? It's like, was I present? Like, well, then I look at another mountain. It's like, I want to figure out how to be here, how to be more present. And that mountain is you can climb that mountain for the rest of your life. So I don't know if I'm sure unless you become a monk, I don't know many people that I can say that I know they live in the present. personally. I may have seen maybe some videos where like, that's like the way they move, the way there's a movement to people that live fully in the present, to people that are in their heads. I would say 80% of my life I'm in my head. So I'm 20% in the present. Now that's better. Before I was 100% on my head. So that 20% on the present goes a long way. And normally happens when I'm meditating.
Wow, it's amazing how much we have in common. I do not jeopardize my morning meditation for anything. Like even we don't drink much anymore, but when we do, I am still going to meditate in the morning. Like it's not negotiable.
Well, one of the things that is not negotiable, and I say this to people, is because some people don't need to meditate because they may not have as big as of things to conquer. There's a Bible verse, and I'm going to misquote it, but the way I understand it is that it's easier for a warrior to conquer an entire nation than to conquer thyself. So it's still the desire of how much you want to conquer thyself. That's when you understand that. That's when you cannot miss a morning of meditation. And because that's the only time where the ego takes the back seat. And I enjoy that because when the ego takes the back seat, then I get clarity into what happened the day before. If I am going through any single kind of conflict, then I can see in a compassionate way that my ego was getting actually in the way. And that has changed my career in many, many ways. Give you an example. I've many times have been up for big films, right? The minute I found out that I'm competing with another filmmaker, my ego just goes crazy and says, you don't need to compete. Just go out, move out. You have all the projects. Just say thanks, but not thanks, and move on to another film. You don't need to be competing. Say, well, either you want me or you want the other guy. Like, I'm not gonna. That's the ego speaking. I'm not, gonna be like, oh, let me date you, and then let me date you, and then let me date you, and see who I like the best, right? That's the ego speaking. Then you go meditate. So you go to sleep like that, and then you say, tomorrow, I'm pulling the plug. I'm getting out of the competition because I'm too big to compete. So I shouldn't be competing, right? Next day, you go meditation. And the meditation goes, that was just your ego. What do you mean you're too big? Who's too big? Too big in comparison to what? You're actually small. And not only small, you're not practicing gratitude. You should just be grateful that you are on the run, that you are considered. So that, but it's in a loving way. Because right now, even the way I'm speaking, it almost sounds like it's somebody scolding. But when you meditate, the voice is different. It's actually in a nice, it's very, very compassionate. It's a different voice from the ego. And I say meditation is when you connect to the voice of your soul. Because you're definitely are not your voice, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to hear all this destructive dialogue that goes in your head, that one I just explained. So therefore, your soul has a voice? Absolutely. Well, how do you hear the voice? In silence. Well, how do you get to silence? Well, you quiet the mind. Well, how do you quiet the mind? Well, you got to understand that the guy talking is your own ego. And in order to quiet it, guess what? It is impossible. You will never quiet the mind, because your ego will never, when the ego dies, most likely you will die. So the bad news is you can never quiet your ego and the mind. It's impossible. Well, then what's the solution? Well, you can ignore it. That's the solution. That's meditation. That's just, how many times have you ever been on a place that is so loud and be able to have the most intimate conversation with someone, because we completely tune out everything and you focused into that. Almost, they can even whisper and you can hear the whisper because you're getting in tune with that particular voice. So it's the same thing with meditation. All you do is you tune out the noise, the bigger noise, which is your ego. And then especially you focus on what? Well, that's what meditation transcends into contemplation. So meditation you can do, contemplation happens to you. It's when you get a little drop of enlightenment. And that's kind of that journey that continues on, you know. Now I want to tell this story because this story I just heard it the other day, and it's a beautiful story. Is there's if you go to someone's house, they invited you to dinner, and when you're walking in, you look in their lawn, the dogs poop, and they didn't clean it. And you enter into the house, and as soon as you enter, you notice that the house, it's a complete mess. There's toys everywhere, and you notice how disorganized it is. And then when they give you a little glass of wine, you notice that it still has water spots all over. And then when you sit down, you notice that, everything is so completely off. They give you the wrong fork. They give you a salad fork instead of a big fork, and everything is just out. The recommendation is that you never, ever, ever go back into that house ever again. And you know why? Not because it was all disorganized. It's because you have a dirty heart. Because if somebody invited you to your house, cook for you, it's making the time for you, and all you're doing is judge and see, you are the one with the heart that is not clean. So before you don't ever go back there, because it's a disrespect until you clean your heart. And when I heard that story, I was very moved by the story because I didn't know the ending. I was like, whoa, I'll go back. But then I realized that you're not practicing gratitude. When you don't practice gratitude, you see all of the dust on other people's lives. But when you have gratitude, you don't see the dust on other people's lives. You're just grateful, and you see the love and anything that they're doing for you. So it continues to be a journey, Life is a journey until it ends.
Yeah. Well, that story is gold. I mean, it did the same exact thing to me. I was like expecting the opposite ending. You just never know. Like, ironically, when you were telling the story, I was thinking about how clean and pristine my house was before I opened up my most recent set of businesses 9.5 years ago. And the going has gotten so tough over the last few years that, man, I mean, our house isn't dirty, but there are repairs that need to be done. Andrea and I, and for those of you who are watching, Andrea is my wife, we are pretty big on presentation on the one hand. On the other hand, if like, it's either clean up this stack of stuff or get to work on time and make sure that a meeting happens to ensure that everyone has bread on the table at night. You got to leave that stack of stuff sitting there on the counter, or maybe dog poop in the yard, whatever. That's an awesome story. Thank you for sharing it. As far as the meditation goes, you mentioned you started it 8 years ago. Was there something specific that happened in your life that led you to start that?
Yeah, of course. I don't want to talk about that too much because it's a thing, but 2015, there was a family tragedy that happened. Pain was way bigger than I could handle. This is, I become friends. For me, I tell this to my kids. If you only become friends with people that think like you, that means you're going to live in a bubble and you're not going to understand what's going on in life. Since I've been a kid, I become friends with all kinds of ways with different thinkers and philosophies of life. So one of the things that I share with, I have a lot of friends, practice any faith. One of my ways to share my own spirituality is that when that level of pain hit me, there's no way, humanly speaking, that I could get out of there if it was not by my faith. There's no way. I know myself. Everything in me just wanted to kind of numb the pain with anything, literally. If you were to give me, this is the pill that will numb you and put you in a coma, I will take it. It's like, all right, it's just anything to numb that. It was a pain that was bigger than I could carry. And this is what unfortunately, or fortunately, but suffering is part of the human experience. Not suffering, you're not a human. So suffering is, one of the main things that give meaning to people's lives. It's hard to understand. I didn't make the rules, but I experienced the rules. And when that level of suffering came into my life, I drowned. I literally drowned. And I felt that there was no, it was like if somebody just right now, we're doing this interview and they came in and they give you a 200-pound sack of potatoes and they just put it in the back of your back. And they say, here, this is how you're going to live for the rest of your life with this 200-pound sack of potatoes. Boom. And it's permanent. Your first reaction is like, man, I can't go, I see you have a motorcycle in the back. I can go motorcycle with a sack of potato in the back. I can go surfing. I cannot do this. I cannot open a bit. It's too heavy. And yes, you can't because you're not strong enough to carry a 200-pound sack of potatoes. That's when I realized it took me some time. Again, not everything is from day to day. So after carrying that sack of potatoes without moving, just getting crushed by the pain, I realized that I had two options. One, I let the sack of potatoes really destroy me all the way to the point of killing me, or I just start building very strong legs and be able to walk with a 200-pound sack of potatoes. And that understanding came through meditation because I was very hungry. When I realized that, I started reading into how do you do that? How do you do it? And when I say it, it's like, how do you become a strong insight, the inner strength? And that's when tragedy is what invited me to explore the strength of, that it's inside of you. Continue to dive in what's inside of you. I'm Catholic. It's called the Holy Spirit, So I started to try to tap into that, and I started to realize there was a lot of noise in my head. So I started to read, and I started reading a lot of books. I read more books, I think, in that year than in my entire life. And one book would lead me to another book, and one book to another, and then I started, I self-taught how to meditate, and I started just getting guided meditations. I started going from one to the other one to the other one. I went through all the ways until I realized meditation is the most personal thing in the world. It's something that you customize for you. So you can take from a little bit from everywhere. And then it became a meditation that then it transcended into a morning prayer. So I start meditation first, and then once I'm in a state of calm and I do my breathing exercises and everything, then I'm in a place where if I do a prayer, I just feel the prayer has a way deeper power. So I started to heal, and then I started to be able to walk with a 200, and I started to be able to function. And then I realized, wow, tomorrow meditation is Popeye. It's the spinach to go on. But then, like Popeye, the power dies. So it's not something you do once a week, something you have to do every day. It's almost, I believe, it's better that you meditate every day, even for 1 minute, than if you meditate once a week for 20 hours. It's way more powerful if you do it consistent. It's the same thing as, there's the human biology. It's like, it's better you go to the bathroom every day than once a week. It's the same thing. This is a daily practice. So it becomes not so much, but it becomes to exist when you realize, because now I look back, I was like, how was I able to live? I started meditating when I turned, 2015. So I don't know how that, 8 years ago? Yeah. No, more.
About 10
years. So, wow.
Yeah.
So I've been meditating for 10 years. So it's how do I live before I meditated? And I realized that Everybody meditates. They just don't know it. You cannot. The people that do not meditate, I think they become schizophrenic and become somehow mental. There's mental disorders. So everybody meditates, and people say, "No, I don't meditate." I say, "Yeah, you do." If I looking back, and my father loved cutting the grass. Now in Mexico, gardeners are very affordable, so he could just. It's not, it's not like in the U.S. that things are more expensive. In Mexico, having a gardener is not a luxury; it's just normal. Well, my father liked to do his own grass, and now looking back, he was meditating. It's when you disassociate. There's people that go for a run every day, and it's like, I have to go for a run. There's people that surf every day. There's people that go to the gym every day. And it's an association where it's your time, where you are outside of your mind. I do feel that everybody, in a way, does is unconscious meditation, but they do it. Everybody meditates, and this is a conscious type of meditation. But I'm a believer that everybody meditates unconsciously, because otherwise, there's no way your mind can, unless then you become crazy, because your mind it's so chaotic. So all you gotta do is just listen to it, and it's like, wow. Some people may have crazier minds than others. Mine is just absolutely, chaotic. And when I observe it, I disempower it. And when I realized I could disempower my mind, that's when I was like, wow, that's where I get power. By disempowering these lies, 99% of what we worry about never happens. Never happens. It's like, wow. And that's how I started. It was when an incident happened, and boom, that's when that was either that or I don't know. I don't know what was the other path. I'm glad I don't know. I did know for a few months, and it was so destructive. It was so destructive that this is when I realized I needed to, I wanted to numb the pain. And obviously one of the easiest things that is just everywhere is alcohol. And I remember one time I drank almost a full bottle of tequila, and it did not, I'm not kidding. It did not have I was sober as I could be. And that's when I realized the pain is way greater than this medicine, which is a fake medicine. Maybe I need a second bottle, because the first bottle did nothing. Now, I'm not a very strong drinker. Like now, if I drink a shot or two of tequila, I'll be like, hey, what's up? Because I was in such a great deep pain, alcohol was not having an impact on me. That's when I realized there is something that goes beyond of what the human can understand. That's why the ego, when science says, oh, we know this, we know. I'm like, well, what was that? What's that? Like, have anybody ever done a research on somebody who's in great, great pain? The effect of alcohol is different. Dark place with great pain. I mean, I'm not inviting people to go do that research, but for my own experience, that's for me was an awakening. I said, this is not going to cure me. It's not making me forget it. So that was what I feel the grace of God really guided me with compassion. It's not that way. That way, you're not going to get healed. You want to get healed. You get healed from the inside out, not from the outside. It's not by what you intake. It's by what you build from inside. So there is nothing you can intake, nothing. Because I almost think if I was to go to a doctor at that time, they would have put me on antidepressant pills. And then that's a different problem, because now you're fixing one problem with another problem. Then you're addicted to. So I was self-medicating myself with what I knew was available to me, but I definitely knew that part too. I was like, I don't want to be put on and numb me with something. If I'm gonna explore that part, I'm gonna take my tequila that I know. So, but that didn't heal at all. So that's the answer to how I started diving into meditation. And now, if I ever, when things like that, where I face situations that punch you, that they put you like a little more weight on you, I run to the chair, to tap into the inner power.
Absolutely, yeah. And I totally respect the fact that you don't want to, talk too much about the situation. I will say though that there are a lot of people that are going to watch that are in really dark places. So, is there anything you can share to just give the viewers even a tiny taste of like how terrible the situation was that you were in?
So there is natural ways to leave this earth, and then there is unnatural ways to leave this earth. My father and my brother, they were taken, and by force. I don't even want to say the word, but people can put it together, and for ransom. And then they took their lives. From my mother's point of view, they took her husband and her first child. From my point of view, they took my father and my older brother. So at once, all at the same time. So that is not natural.
No.
It's different that if you're diagnosed with cancer, you get a chance to go through the process. I mean, we're all gonna die different ways, but I think this is a way. This is not natural for one person to take other person's life. It's not the way that the cycle of life is supposed to. That's not the design. It's like having an iPhone, and let's say you buy a brand new iPhone, whatever iPhone we are today, I don't know, 17, and you have an iPhone, and the next day somebody steals your iPhone. Well, that's not the way the iPhone was designed to stop working. It stops working if your iPhone is an iPhone 8 and you're an iPhone 17. Well, you had it for 10 years. That's understandable. But if somebody, violated your space, broke into your house, took your iPhone, that's not how the guy who designed your iPhone was intended for your iPhone to stop working. It was not by design. That's how human life is. Human life was never designed for somebody else to come and take it from you. So that is completely violates the nature of your own experience on this earth. And when that happened to us as a family, you're not prepared for that. You're not prepared for that. And I was not prepared for that. I didn't know. I say this, people think they know themselves. That's the biggest lie. Your ego tells you that you know yourself. Everybody's capable of doing the most beautiful thing and noble thing, but everybody's capable of doing very dark things. And you don't know who you are. You think you know who you are when everything is in equilibrium, when everything is perfect. Oh, I know who I am. Well, do you still know who you are when the plane is going nose diving 100 miles per hour and you're going to die? Well, how are you going to react? You don't know how you're going to react. And thought I knew who I was until that happened. And I realized that if I thought I was strong, I was, that's when I realized how weak I was. I was like, whoa. So it continues to be. So the sack of potatoes is there. I was, people that may be listening, everybody wants to hear, oh, but things got better, right? Happy ending. Well, the whole happy ending, to me, it's more, you'll be, the good news is you'll be able to find joy again. And you'll be able to, carry on. But to say that the pain will be gone, the pain is there. Now, can you, live and enjoy life with that pain? Absolutely. That's the good news. I can go surfing with my sack of potatoes. I can go and spend wonderful quality time with my children, with my sack of potatoes. But the sack of potatoes is coming with me. It's not staying, but I be able to have a great meal, and you get to enjoy life with your sack of potatoes because you can carry it. And as you get time, you get stronger and stronger and stronger. So the 200 pounds is like if all of a sudden you got stronger. Now 200 pounds is like if you're carrying a 10-pound sack of potatoes, but still 200 pounds. Now it only feels like 10 pounds because you became stronger by necessity, not necessarily by desire, but this is the only way to survive. That's how it is. Oh, well, that's how it is for me. Again, opinion It's not a fact. Everybody has their own ways of surviving. For me, this was my way of surviving.
So sorry for your loss. This is absolutely terrible. Couldn't even imagine that. Again, that this is the kind of story that is, I mean, surrender, right? No surrender, you don't give up, right? Surrender to the light, surrender to God, in those darkest times. I haven't had that particular thing happen to me, but I was nearly murdered. I was assaulted by a group of guys when I was ironically the same age you were when you came to the United States, when I was 17, and had to have facial cranial reconstructive surgery, and just totally. I went from that to shortly thereafter I was homeless, living out of motels, and as you said, you think you're strong, and then something terrible happens, and you realize how weak you really were. And it doesn't matter what you thought or what your friends thought or your family members thought about how strong you were. None of that matters because you're feeling that, oh my God, like I thought I knew, but I have, as you say, that now I have this 200-pound sack of potatoes and I'm not strong enough to carry it. I don't know about you. I mean, you've already kind of mentioned it. You've been meditating for about 10 years now. I didn't know it, but I was lost. Like the word lost didn't come to mind, but I wandered. I wandered from major to major in college. I wandered from city to city. I transferred to different schools, and I thought I was just searching for like something I was as passionate about, as like football or cars, things that I was interested in. But the fact of the matter is that I was lost, and so yeah, it's these. I believe that these stories are going to help a lot of people, because if I would have heard the story that you just told when I was at one of my lowest points, I think it would have helped me quite a bit, because you can, I've done a lot of reading. I've read over 400 books that have to do with, either human performance, like, self-help, or people who were successful and how they became successful. On the one hand, on the other hand, to hear a story like that with that beautiful analogy to the sack of potatoes, it's like that right there is enough, for some people, it will be enough just hearing that story. So again, I'm sorry, very sorry for your loss, and thank you very much for sharing that story. And
Yeah, and one thing that I would like to add is another part that helped me heal was not to try to understand. If you try to understand a tragedy, you can also drown. It's almost adding more weight, your own weight. Now they give you a sack of potatoes, boom. And imagine now you is like, well, this is not heavy enough. Let me put some more potatoes in it. To me, trying to understand or make sense to what happened to you in any way, shape, or form, whatever tragedy or whatever it is, pain comes in all kinds of different ways. You got fired, divorce, whatever, a disease, cancer, whatever it is, losing a loved one. Trying to understand is not going to bring healing. And that's where surrender to the light, it makes sense, because that's where acceptance comes in. Acceptance brings healing. Trying to understand, man, that just opening the wound and putting some lime in it, because it will make no sense. There's no explanation. Why so and so got cancer? Why so and so got the... If you start asking the whys, it's not going to bring any healing. It's actually may bring more pain. I always believe acceptance is like you just figure out how to accept it. And how do you accept it? By not trying to understand. Don't rely on your own understanding. I mean, that's in the Bible. Don't rely on your own understanding, because there are some things that are not meant for us to understand, but definitely they're meant for us to accept. Because you don't have an option. It's not like you have the option not to accept it. It is what it is. It's just like any natural disaster that happens. It's like this was just on, I don't know, it was one a couple of days ago, and I saw the pictures of the water and everything. And I'm like, well, so people right there just lost everything. Imagine if they're trying to understand why this hurricane came in. Why is this, what happened in Texas with the water that, around all those children. I think trying to understand why that happened, you want to write, like, it's not like, where do you start? It's at one point is you just have to figure out how to heal, and acceptance is first part of the journey to healing. So that, I would say, that is also another path that eventually I had to apply, just not just me, collectively as my whole family, because I was not the only one going into the pain. And the third one that also helped is when you take your eyes out of your own pain, when you pull your eyes into the other people's, whoever, because when life hits you, it hits whoever loves you. If you are in a situation, and let's say that you are, just for the sake of exploration, they tell you, okay, you have 2 years to live, you have cancer. You think it's all about you, but all the people who love you, they're also now with that news, even if perhaps you may be the provider, then they're also in pain. For the minute you take your eyes off you and you put it on people, that also brings a level of healing where it's you try to live for others, to figure out what others need, and that also helps to heal you. It makes no sense in many ways, but it's healing. We don't need to make sense. I don't know how medicine works. Just sick and they give you pill. I'm not trying to understand. Well, I want to know what this does, how it goes into my cells, and how I don't know. I just take it. So I don't know exactly why taking your eyes off you and putting on others when you're in pain, it brings healing. I have my own ideas, and there's also a lot of biblical, to back this kind of statement, but it's acceptance, pulling away, not looking at your wound, but looking at the other people's wounds. And you actually, when you put your eyes out of your own wound and you look at other people's wounds, your wound becomes small. You're like, wow, their wound is bigger. And we all have wounds. I don't know anybody who doesn't have a wound. We're wounded beings and somehow, bleeding. And it's when help others. I don't know who said this, but I think it was Mother Teresa said, a life not lived for others is a wasted life. Or it was Albert Einstein. I don't know. Don't quote me, but it was one of those guys. The journey continues on.
Yeah, and going hand in hand with a lot of what you just said, another word that comes to mind is forgiveness. It's so hard when you've been through the valley of the shadow of death and someone else put you there, put your family there. But, speaking of the Bible, it's super, super hard. But if you carry that hatred in your heart and your soul and your mind for the people who put you there, put your family there, they're still living in your head rent free.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I got the chills just saying that, because there are so many people walking around this planet right now that are taking antidepressants or drinking a lot of alcohol or doing a lot of drugs or all of the above because they have not let go of something that they're dwelling on from the past.
Yeah.
Whether it's something they did to someone else or something that was done to them or their family that they have not forgiven them for yet.
No, for sure. I mean, forgiveness is definitely a massive step towards healing. And nothing of this that we're talking, it's easy. So that's why I always, as part of always what I share with people, is we want to hear things are easy. And no, I mean, nothing worth living for is easy. Nothing. I don't. Everything. You want to get strong, physical. Well, it's not easy. You got to go to the gym and work out and do the thing. You want to be married and be happily married. Well, you have to really, do your work. Everything requires effort. And we live in exactly what we're talking about cars. Now with the technology, we are programmed that things are easy because why? Before, in my days, you want to make a phone call, you pick up the phone and then you have to see each number, like dial it and then back to one, number two, So you dial 9 numbers. Then you call, and then they answer on the other house, and you ask for the person you want to talk to, and then they say, let me see if he's there. And then they'll make you wait for 3 or 4 minutes, then come back, and it says, well, he's in the shower. Call back in 5 minutes. You're like, okay. That, to talk to somebody, sometimes it would take 45 minutes to get onto a phone. Now, today, it's boom, boom, text, dude. It's like one button, things. You go into a car, now they're keyless. It's just like the car now drives itself. So unconsciously, then we are trained to say life is easy. And then you get hit, and we don't know how to react because we're supposed to not heal easy. So nothing is easy on this apartment. Forgiveness is not easy. Sounds beautiful. Sounds super easy. But like the story you were telling me about, create all these cows and they wrongly were accusing you. It's right there. Well, the easy thing is just to forgive them. Well, it will bring healing, but it's going to take time to genuinely, because there's 2 types of forgiveness, the ones that are from the teeth out and the ones that are in your heart. The one from your heart, the one from teeth out is the easy. That one is in 1 second. Oh, I forgive them. I see it with my kids. It's like, tell them you're sorry. Sorry. But I'm like, you didn't mean it. You're really not sorry. You're just saying it. So there is the one that is in the heart. That one takes time. It's not expected to boom one day to the other one. It's a process. And it's a process that little by little, the more you cultivate that forgiveness, the more you start feeling peace. So you're like, oh, well, then I give you more because I like that peace that I'm feeling. And then it's little by little because you're feeling the consequence that comes with forgiveness. Forgiveness is not for the other ones, it's for yourself. So it's little by little. Like you forgive one a little bit by the day, little by little. And then eventually you start feeling that peace that comes with, and it's with letting go and accepting and, not necessarily you forgive them, that means you're going to be friends with them. Forgive them to heal, but you should be as far, from my opinion, you should be as far as possible from anybody that bring you any kind of level of harm. But you forgive them, and look, people can change in whatever situations is, but you'll know when they change. Many times people forgive, go back, and they get like, well, how many times have they punched you in the face? Well, this is the 7th time. But I forgive him 7. I was like, well, maybe next time you forgive him, don't go back and time to move on somewhere else if that job keeps punching you and not respecting you. Because it's not necessarily the punches come from always speaking symbolical. It's not a physical punch, but a corporation, a company, a business partner, anyone can punch you by their decisions, by not respecting who you are in terms of your value, your time. If it's your children's birthday and that day they knew and they schedule you a meeting, and at one point it's like, okay, forgive you, but for the majority of the extremes, when you go to extreme, are not necessarily healthy. There's a few of them that are healthy. There is extremes that are good, but for the most parts are not the best.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you that are watching, if you haven't researched Alejandro, he's produced a number of movies, and for me, the one that was most touching was The Sound of Freedom. If you don't know what it's about, it has to do with child trafficking, which is estimated to be a $39 billion a year industry. The movie takes you deep into the true story of Tim Ballard's life. Tim Ballard was deeply involved with, and I think he still is, trying to end as much of the child trafficking as possible. There is a part of the movie that does a very good job of illustrating one of the most disturbing things that those agents or officers have to do, and that is transcribe video recordings of these heinous acts occurring. And when you consider the disgusting, nature and the fact that these agents have to do this over and over again, like if you could wave a magic wand, you learned very, very intimately about that, to produce the movie to the level of, the last time I checked, I think it still had a 99%
score on Rotten Tomatoes from the viewers. You know, I mean, it's, if you haven't seen the movie, I highly recommend you see the movie. But Alejandro, what do you think a realistic way is to try to end that? I mean, you know, you and I have touched on terrible atrocity that you and your family went through. I briefly touched on nearly being murdered myself. Yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts? There's so much light,
Yeah.
and then there's so much darkness, you know? So what are your thoughts on things that we
Well,
do?
when I make movies, I like to make films that bring light into darkness, especially a subject matter that nobody wanted to talk about. I try not to make movies to offer solutions because I don't know the solution, but I can shine a light on a problem to invite audiences to create a conversation and an awareness. To me, if you're aware of the dark, then collectively we can shine a light in it. So to me, the solution is to create a conversation like Sound of Freedom started to create a conversation, create awareness. Every film I made a movie after that called Cabrini that also explores the darkness that goes with homelessness and so on. So there is an invitation. I like to make movies that begin when the movie ends, that leaves you in a state of reflection, because a reflective heart creates meaningful conversations. That is the most important thing. We live in a society right now that, and I don't want to sound judgmental, but if you look, we're full surrounded by things that have absolutely no meaning. No meaning. There's no meaning. The conversation starts to become very, very superficial. And we're feeding that monster by only portraying in social media your disillusion of happiness. You know, it's all your food, your thing. The thing is like just giving one side of the equation. You start to lose meaning because, like we were talking about, suffering is part of our human experience. So human trafficking, it is a very, very, it's almost like we're embarrassed to talk about that, especially child trafficking, because it's the worst of humanity to do that, to abuse children. It's the lowest of the lowest. And this film, all we wanted to do was to make a film that created a conversation. And that conversation has begun, and I hope it continues on. But that could be one of the paths to create awareness, because I started seeing, and not because of the film, but this problem is not new. It's been here over it 2015 when I started doing research. So all I did was just to bring it into the foreground to create a dialogue, and dialogue, conversation creates awareness, and awareness creates change. So to me, that's the first step on any kind of, look, right now it's human trafficking here, but there's all kinds of darkness out there. You know, just what's happening with the internet. For those who have children, it's so dangerous. What's out there, it's so dangerous. Objectification of women, you know, this whole, the internet is also heavily weighted with a lot of things that can poison the minds of children and take their innocence away by just looking at some images that are out there. So I just think creating awareness, you know, but at the end, I'm a filmmaker, and it's just like people come to the theaters to be entertained. So it's how to use, you know, the magic of cinema to create meaningful conversation, meaningful content, but still coming in, you can get your popcorn and enjoy the film. So that's been my dance to my entire career. Every film that I have done, it's always an invitation to discuss the subtext, all the way from my first film, Bella, which is explore the conversation of unwanted pregnancies. Then Little Boy was to explore, is fate real or is a superstition from a very, very objective point of view. You know, I wrote that movie I collaborated with people that believe that fate was a superstition, and you know, it's like, well, let's put it out there and let the audience, you know, process and digest the way they want to digest it. And then Sound of Freedom, you know, exploring this darkness on human trafficking. And then Cabrini, really exploring the life of the immigrant from perspective of the immigrant that comes to this country to build the country up. And this is a story that happened in the 1890s from the Italian immigration when, in New York City, where there's a lot of conflict between the Irish and the Italians and so on. But what ended up happening is the children were abandoned on the streets. So it was this woman that comes in and starts rescuing children from the streets. So that's been the journey. And my new movie is called Zero AD, which is about the persecution of mother. Just in this case, is the mother of Jesus. So, but she was persecuted by Herod. So those are and right now I'm working on different few films, but they're all films that entertain, but also invite for conversation. When the movie ends, my hope is that the conversation dives into a deeper meaning. There's room for everything, just like there are seasons. There are seasons to have conversations that are absolutely meaningless, which is nothing wrong, but then should be also space as a society, collectively, to discuss things that are not necessarily the most things that we're proud of as human beings. It's collective. It's easier to point the finger, but are we part of the problem by not talking about it, by staying silent? Is that a problem? I cannot tell you how many times, there's a lot of researchers out there, and maybe I have been part unconsciously where you see something is wrong, and then you just look the other way because you feel like somebody else is going to do something about it. And maybe it's the one you're supposed to do something about it. And that's, as a society, are we creating a space to not be ashamed to speak? It almost looks like we are on this way of thinking that silence is the way. So I don't agree with the silence is the way. I think having healthy conversations is the way. I think we should be allowed to have conversations, and it's okay to think different. This whole thing of, well, you have to think like me, otherwise we're not going to play soccer. I think, hey, let's play. We're living in a society. You can think, one way, I can think a different way, but we need to, have a conversation and sit down on the same table and break bread. And I think right now, I've been on this country for 30 years. I've never seen it at this level of it's very divided. I believe politics divide, and I like to create art that unites, that invites people with two different points of views to create a conversation. Conversation to me, when we stop talking to each other, that's dangerous, very dangerous. But if you talk, you don't need to agree, but you may understand the other person. That's something I've practiced my whole life. I hang with people that think like me, but I make sure I have a lot of friends that don't think like me. And I actually built a very strong friendships. Like we genuinely good friendships, and we completely, and I don't agree with their way of thinking. They don't agree with my way of thinking, but we go and we break bread and we take trips, and I try to educate myself of why they think that way. And when I listen to them, guess what happens? Then they listen to you. And I think we live in a society we stop listening. And listening there's a reason why we have 2 ears and one mouth. I think when we listen to other points of views, they will listen to yours. But if we don't listen to their points of views, why are we expecting them to listen to ours? So, and how do you listen? Is to build, first you got to build a relationship, a friendship based on something else. It's like the minute you go into a place and they bring politics, I was like, well, let's talk politics maybe later. Right now, what kind of wine are you drinking? Or, when was the last time, I surf as much as I can. And if I'm with surfers, let's talk about things that, you'll be amazed, but people that disagree with each other so much, you'll find out that they agree on 90% of the things. There's 10% all they want is talk about that 10%. We'll start with the 90%. And then you build, it's the best way to create a healthy debate is between friends. So let's first be friends, and then go into debate or a conversation that is difficult. The word debate is already, but that a conversation that might be a little difficult to have. But that's the what I like about movies, and I like all kinds of movies. I'm also working on films that are just because I love cinema.
Yeah, that's awesome. And
Wow.
I think you really hit the nail on the head there with the conversations. That's the primary point of this show. Like, good conversations about good topics, so other people can hopefully, take, even I've been saying lately, even if we only do 10 episodes and help one person, then it'll be worth it.
It'll be good. Well, I thank you for what you're doing, creating conversations, and it was an honor to be able to share and to talk to you, and you're opening the space to create conversations. And I thank you for that. It was very nice to meet you. You guys have my information. Maybe we can do part 2 another time.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Well, very, very nice to meet you, and we'll keep in touch.
Alrighty, sounds good. Thanks again. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.